When you think ballet, I know that what you probably envision is ladies in little tutus, standing on their toes, men leaping through the air, doing dramatic things. But that's not how ballet really got its start. Ballet comes from the late 1600s, early 1700s, in the court of King Louis XIV. Louis loved to dance, and he wanted everybody around him to dance as well. So if you were a person who had any intentions of being in tight with the king, you better learn how to dance and to do it well. He really valued it that much. So in Louis XIV's court, ballet was a regular part of events. The French still love ballet. Even into the 19th century, when we start looking at French opera, in the middle of the opera, there's often a ballet scene. That's how much they value it. It comes from Louis XIV, the Sun King. So he loved it so much that he actually hired somebody to be responsible for all the music and dance parts of his court. And that person was JeanBaptiste Lhomme, who was actually an Italian, but he changed his name so he sounded really French. So he knew which side his bread was buttered on. So Lhomme was the first head of the Music and Dance Academy in France, the Royal Academy. And that's an organization that I think still exists today. So he was responsible for a lot of things. He wrote the music for the dances that were going on, but he was also responsible for the dance itself. So he did a lot of things that we now think of as being very typical parts of the dance. He was standardized those 5 foot positions that all ballet dancers learn, and I will give you a video that shows you those positions about how their feet are used. He also standardized things about the way that they would leap and jump. Now, we're talking about very different kinds of leaps and jumps in 1700 when Louis was doing this than we were talking about in the 19th century, because dancing ballet was very different at that time. But he did also look at that. He also helped to develop a system of writing down the dance itself. The part of the dance that's danced, as opposed to the musical part, is called the choreography, and the person who writes that is the choreographer. So if I'm the choreographer and I have designed a dance for this particular piece of music, and somebody in another court wants to use that same dance, I have to have some way of writing it down so that they can recreate what I have done. And so this was all developed very early here in the late 1600s, early 1700s. So another thing that Louis did was to bring women into the equation. As you will see in the video that I have for you to watch, the dancers are men, the king and his court, mostly men. Louis brought the women into the whole process. One of the things that, one of the little ballets that's really famous from that period of time is one where the women sort of come into, there's like a big party, and all these dancers are part of a bigger social scene, and they would come in and they would basically have a sort of a story that they have to connect them, where they come in and do whatever they're going to do, and then they incorporate the audience into the dance. So it's sort of like we're going to dance first and get everybody sort of ready to dance, and then everybody else would join into the dance. So that's sort of how he got the women involved in it. So what were these dances like? Not like what you think of as ballet today. So there's no toe shoes, there's no standing on your tiptoes. It's not like that at all. As you will see in the video, the shoes that they're wearing are very much like the shoes that they would have worn regularly. So they're regular shoes with heels on them, and sometimes even really pretty high heels for men. They like those big stacked heels back then. So the dances are very stylized. So it's not like you have a big star dancer as we would think of in ballet today. More like a group kind of dance where everybody's doing similar kinds of steps. So very formal, much less movement about what we would think of as the stage area than you would see in later ballet. It's a much more confined kind of movement. And remember, they're wearing their regular clothes, and clothes were very heavy back then. They were wearing a ton of weight just walking around. So it's not going to be any big jumping up off the ground. So those are some of the basic ideas of early ballet. The terminology that we use for ballet is in French. So that history is so strong that even today we keep that idea of the ballet being a very French kind of thing. So I'd like you to watch a video, and this is from a movie about the king of dance, the dance king. So it's not what you would see if you saw a stage production, but it just gives you a nice idea about what the dance itself would have looked like. So take a look at that, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about some things that happened shortly after that. All right, so now you've seen what that original ballet in the court of Louis XIV would have looked like. Obviously, we've moved beyond that, and it didn't take very long. It's not even 50 or so years more before we see the dancers wanting to really let people see what it is that they're doing. If you think about the costumes that those people are wearing, the men, you can see their feet, but if the women dancers are wearing long dresses, you couldn't see anything that their feet were doing anyway. It would just be that they sort of looked graceful as they moved because the skirts would have swayed nicely, but you couldn't really see what they were doing. So Marie Camargo is the ballet dancer who is credited with the idea that let's make the skirt shorter so you can see my feet. She was so famous that we actually have a painting of her in her dance kind of approach. This was a big deal. We have moved from big clunky shoes, and although hers are still a little bit clunky, but we can now see what her feet are doing, and we can see that dance is evolving into something more like what we think of as ballet today. So I'm giving you that picture here to see. You can see the skirt is shorter. It's not a tutu like what we think of, but at least it's got up, it's still below her knees. And you see that her shoes, though they're not toe shoes now, they don't have the big clunky heels on them anymore. So she is able to do more delicate kinds of movements. And that's what she wanted to be able to show people, that she could do these really intricate things with her feet and her legs. And so she changed her costume to make that happen. The big step in the development of ballet, and as we'll see when we get into the 1800s, skirts get even shorter, toes get even taller.